Jewish Channel's Week in Review. Gearing up for elections in Israel, but who's going to run? Getting in the ring again is Orthodox Jewish boxer Dmitry Salita, and Barbara, our reporter's greatest fantasy achieved. It's the Jewish news that's changing your world right now in this episode of the Week in Review. Hello, and welcome to the Jewish Channel's Week in Review. I'm Stephen I. Weiss. All former Israeli prime ministers who face no threat of criminal prosecution, please step forward. Not so fast, Ehud Olmert. Israel's state prosecutor has decided to appeal the acquittals of former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, who resigned in 2009 amid reports of a scandal that did lead to his prosecution. But that prosecution led mostly to acquittals earlier this year, and Olmert, who'd governed as a leader of the Kadima party, was even cleared to resume his political career immediately if he so chose. But now, just as election season is kicking into high gear in Israel, the acquittals are being challenged. And with elections scheduled for January, there's very little time for Olmert to both deal with an appeal challenge and run for office should he choose to do so. And yes, you heard correctly, Israeli elections are coming in January, less than 130 days from now. The Knesset voted on Tuesday to go to early elections on the 22nd of January, at which we'll see the election of the 19th Knesset. But in election news here in the United States, the most obviously Jewish candidate for Congress, Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, who's running as a Republican in a Democratic-leaning district, got another boost from casino magnate Sheldon Adelson, who's made a second $500,000 donation to the super PAC supporting Boteach. That's $1 million in total, plus $10,000 directly to the campaign. But one former Jewish presence in Congress lost a years-long battle with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma on Sunday. Arlen Specter was 82. Specter served in the Senate for 30 years representing Pennsylvania. He lost his 2010 bid for re-election after switching from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party and then losing his Democratic primary. Specter had imprinted his name on several key moments in U.S. history. In the 1960s, he investigated the assassination of former President John F. Kennedy as a member of the Warren Commission and was reportedly the first to assert that a single bullet struck both the president and Texas Governor John Connally. In the 1980s, Specter was a major force in the Senate for the cause of Soviet Jewry. Then and later, he worked to expand U.S. law on admitting immigrants facing persecution in their home countries. One such country was Iran, and the flood of Persian Jewish refugees to the U.S. at that time is in part attributable to his efforts. Specter's father had come to the U.S. from the Ukraine and was eventually buried in Israel. Specter was also particularly known for his championing of the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, and seeking to fund basic research into curing disease and the medical problems of our time. Specter, who'd been a Democrat early in his career, switched back to the party in a move that soon led the Senate to be without a Jewish Republican for the first time in decades. In making his move, Specter said he was responding to his feeling that the Republican Party had, quote, moved far to the right. Specter was buried at Shalom Memorial Park near Philadelphia on Tuesday, after a memorial service at Hartzion Temple. Vice President Joe Biden and other prominent U.S. elected officials spoke. Throughout his career, Specter was known as a fierce fighter for the causes he believed in. And now, another Jewish icon is preparing to literally fight to make the next step in his career. Dmitry Salita is known to longtime TJC viewers as the Jewish Channel has broadcast several of his fights in the past. Now the Orthodox Jewish boxer is going for a belt in his latest fight, which you won't see on TJC, but Christian Needon has this preview.
Boardwalk goers in Brighton Beach got a taste of boxing and politics this past Sunday when Orthodox Jewish boxer Dmitry Salita appeared at the Tatiana Grill Cafe for a meet and greet in advance of his October 20th fight against Brandon Hoskins north of here at the newly opened Barclays Center in downtown Brooklyn. Appearing with Salita was Jewish Republican State Senator David Starobin, who is locked in an election fight of his own with Democratic candidate Simcha Felder in the heavily Jewish 17th State Senate District. Starobin introduced Salita by describing what he means to the Brighton Beach community's Russian and Jewish residents.
He's our bright star in sports, and please come and help and cheer for the guy. He will be the welterweight champion sooner or later, and hopefully much sooner.
Salita returned the compliment with a little cultural perspective.
Similar to myself, Senator Starobin is a Russian American that has truly made it an American culture, and it's someone that I tip my hat off, but keep my yarmulke on, and show a great amount of respect and honor that America is truly the best country in the world because we have the opportunity to make the most of ourselves. And on October 20th, I'll have an opportunity to make history and fight in the opening night of boxing of this new world-class, huge Barclays Arena, and I hope that all of you guys are going to come and show me your support.
I asked Golden Boy publicist and World Boxing Hall of Fame inductee Bill Kaplan for his take on Salita's chances in this fight and what he thought of Salita's most recent bout in August, a TKO of Roberto Valenzuela down in Mobile, Alabama.
It's the best I've ever seen him look. He was fantastic. We expect him to perform well. He's fighting a guy by the name of Hoskins, who's got a 16-2 record, good record. He's fighting as the extra added attraction, but to many people will come to Barclays to see Dmitry Salita, and the 4 World Championship fights will be an extra added attraction for them.
And how much longer can Salita's fans expect to see him in the ring?
Physically and mentally, now I feel better and stronger than probably ever in my career. I know that I'm not going to be doing this for much longer, so I try to do my best every time I go into the ring, and leave good memories for myself and for my fans.
To hear more from Dmitry Salita about his upcoming fight on Saturday, October 20th at the Barclays Center, please tune into the full broadcast edition of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Christian. Speaking of Jewish icons, there's none more important than Barbra Streisand. At least, there's no one more important than Streisand for TJC's own Meredith Gansman. Here's that story.
Barbra Streisand is back on bookshelves, back on the big screen this holiday season. And she's back in Brooklyn singing at the Barclays Center for the first time since she sang on a stoop. The world knows her name. But for the first time in Barbra Streisand's professional career, Brooklyn heard her voice.
I don't know why I'm frightened. I know my way around here. The Brooklyn docks, the Nova locks, the sound here. Yes, a world with hot knishes is incredibly delicious, and I need a moment. So talk amongst yourselves. I'm getting verklempt.
In front of a packed house of over 18,000 adoring fans, she proved that you can go home again.
Hello, Brooklyn! Hello!
Streisand's return to the borough has been over 50 years in the making, and on the Back to Brooklyn tour, she's honoring her roots.
Being here makes me remember so many things. The apartments I lived in, the project, the yeshiva I went to. In Williamsburg, which I hear is very chic now, right? My high school in Flatbush. Oh, what a face!
Back to Brooklyn is Streisand's first concert tour in 6 years. For more from Barbra Streisand's triumphant return to Brooklyn, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Meredith Gansman also caught up this week with a famous singer of a different stripe.
Willkommen, bienvenue, welcome in Cabaret, au Cabaret, to Cabaret.
Oh, Cabaret. I've heard this music for as long as I can remember, but until this week, I had never been to an actual cabaret. Think of the classic nightclubs, big bands, and sultry songs. Coming to the cabaret may seem like a lost pastime, but Jewish songstress Anna Bergman is keeping the musical tradition very much alive.
Parlez-vous français, chanson Paris, filet mignon, n'est-ce pas? Mon ami, chaise longue, café à crème, escargot yum yum, pourquoi?
It's just you and the night and the music. That's the essence of cabaret. It's also the title of Bergman's show, now playing at the famous Feinstein's nightclub in New York City through October.
I meet a better class of man in a museum. His approach is more refined and debonair. Last month I met a basso, perusing a Picasso. The paint is still not dry on our affair.
The daughter of an American diplomat raised mostly overseas, Bergman's repertoire includes musical imports and exports from American songbook standards to European music, pop, and classics, all in a variety of languages. However, Bergman still credits Jewish musical icons like the Gershwins, Irving Berlin, and Leonard Bernstein for influencing her musical styling. For more from Anna Bergman's Cabaret, tune into the full broadcast version of the Week in Review.
Thank you, Meredith. Finally this week, what makes the Jewish people so successful? Not just in surviving over many millennia, but in thriving in the modern world's professional ranks? There have been many theories proposed in the past, but now a former deputy governor of Israel and current economics professor, Tzvi Eckstein, teamed up with a colleague to produce a book, The Chosen Few, to tackle this question in a very new way. Eckstein and his co-author, Maristella Botticini, spent 12 years researching their book, but in an interview here at TJC, we got those ideas in a much shorter time frame. Here are the highlights of that interview. So you address a topic that's fascinated Jews for a long time now, which is the high rate of Jewish achievement in the modern world. We all get those emails about the many Nobel laureates in the Jewish world. And so many have put forth theories as to why this has happened. And what you do most radically, to start with, is that you say, where so many have tried to say that theories of Jewish literacy should be attributed to the early modern period, to Europe, that you say it goes back much farther, that it goes back actually that Islam had a major role.
Well, it actually goes before Islam. I mean,
Right.
The major role is really of the the head rabbi of the temple at that time in the temple, Yoshua ben Gamla.
Right.
And he made a ruling just before the temple destroyed about teaching the boys to read.
And so we're going back to the 1st century here, when you had the Second Temple. You had the Jews had been back in Israel since the Babylonian exile, some 500, 600 years, and here we are as the Second Temple is nearing its end, really, and as the Roman occupation is about to begin, and the Pharisees, the rabbis at the time, decided to say, let's make everybody literate.
Yeah, so the first is always put on literacy and learning the Bible and learning the Torah as the key part of Judaism. The Sadducees, who controlled the temple and were the preachers and so forth, they were very much against it. What happened is that at the destruction of the temple, when the temple was destroyed, sacrifices stopped to be the key, and the temple stopped to be the key, but also all the Sadducees were gone because the Roman killed them. And the first is become the Rabbinate, and they established Jewish Rabbinate Judaism in Yavne and then in the Galilee, and teaching the sons in the synagogue to read the Torah become the primary goal of Jewish life. And they, in fact, implemented it. And during the Mishnah time and the Talmud time, which is like 200 years and 300 years later, we document from existing evidence how the synagogue became the center learning place for Jewish kids. And the Jewish religion was the first to have an importance of a teacher, moreh, and a cheder, a place to study.
Right.
And actually, Jews who do not study to read the Torah themselves are not viewed in the Judaism as equal and as important, and they were kind of secluded. So the Jewish religion was the first group of people, a segment of population, who were fully literate, probably from the, as you say, the Muslim time. During the Muslim time, from the 7th, 8th centuries, almost all Jewish boys knew to be able to read the Torah in Hebrew.
Right, and you could bring a lot of this into today. What's fascinating is that today's Jewish community has a bit of the pre-literate era and the literate era, in that you have a community in the United States right now where the overwhelming majority of affiliated Jews are choosing to go through an educational system that is extremely costly. and for which the joke in the Orthodox Jewish community here in the United States is that $250,000 a year is minimum wage, because you're talking about families that are paying 80, 100 or more in a year in tuition for 3 children. And there's a real question about the continuity of the Jewish people in the United States, where the costs are just so high. And you can see how a great many, and we already do see, especially in this recession, a great many who are deciding that might just be too much for me.
Well, I tell you, the book ended just before the Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492. We are working on a new book, and the new book had to fill up the gap 500 years. And it is quite amazing to see the Jewish community worldwide, and especially in the US. I mean, about 2 million Jews arrived to the US between 1880 to 1920, and they become so successful here. And the question is why? And we have our hypothesis that they had a huge advantage in education. Education was so strongly rooted within the Jewish community that they immediately, when they were able, they just went to the universities and to be lawyers and to be accountants and to be high quality. And what you see is the Jewish group is 80% are college graduate, more than any other group. They are more in occupations like doctors and accountant and lawyers, etc., than other ethnic group comparable, and they end up having a very prosperous community.
But not that prosperous, because the basic statistics here in the U.S. are that the average American household makes around $50 a year, and the average Jewish household makes around $60 a year.
It's still more than
it's a 20%. It's 20% more, but it's not.
It's 20% more, and there is recent studies that show that it's fairly. If you compare them even to comparable groups, they are doing very well. And it's no question that the culture of and the attitude and the social culture to education has been rooted within the Jewish community very much when they arrived here. They arrive literate. They arrive literate from East Europe. Maybe poor, but literate. And that advantage was over the people who came from other parts of Europe here, illiterate.
And so the last question is that that in the Jews who succeeded in remaining Jewish and remaining prosperous throughout the early medieval era, that you had an emphasis on Jewish literacy, creating an emphasis on literacy, creating an emphasis on labor that required high education and thus creating prosperity. Where we now see, as I was mentioning before, the cost of Jewish education being extremely high and the participation rate extremely low. Is there a possibility that, or forget what is there a possibility, where do you see the Jewish population going when Jewish education is being confined to an extreme minority at this point?
Well, this is can be debatable where it's an extreme minority. It's true that education in the U.S. become very expensive. It's true that education in special school, in the best school, has become very expensive. But I think education is the way to basically improve life of everybody. And certainly within the Jewish life, I cannot see a Jewish mother who, you know, the joke that
right.
she say that she has the president is her son. Oh, yeah. She said, no, but I have a doctor, which is another son. So it's a Jewish culture of education is so strongly rooted, and it goes back to maybe 2,000 years. And it's very different. We had basically mandatory education for 2,000 years.
But will Jewish mothers 100 years from now, 200 years from now, be emphasizing education to the degree that they are if they don't have, if it's been many generations since Jewish literacy was a major emphasis?
I think they will. I think one thing we have to recognize is the difference between today, almost everybody become Jewish because everyone is literate. And so our uniqueness relative to 150 years ago diminished.
Right.
And in this sense, our comparative advantage diminished. But
so the Jews are now seeing the great leveling of education.
But on the other hand, if you want to stay Jewish, so you have to go to Yom Kippur and you go to the synagogue, you certainly have to be quite literate. It's true that it's not making you necessarily a high-quality doctor, but it's it's still rooted inside.
You can see the full interview with Eckstein in the weekly news category on the Jewish Channel On Demand on cable. That's all for this week. From all of us here at the Jewish Channel, be well. The Jewish Channel is available on cable. Time Warner Cable Channel 528, IO Optimum Channel 291, RCN Channel 268, Bright House Channel 330, Verizon Fios Channel 900, Cox Channel 1, Frontier Communications, and now on Comcast Cable in the on-demand menu under Premium Channels. For more information, visit tjctv.com.